in those offices. And specifically, I was tortured in her office. And I do believe that she knew that I was being tortured at the time that I was tortured, because she came in, she kept watching me, and she had a little smirk on her face. She knew, and she was part of some kind of observation of some sort. Basically, the form of torture that was used against me is she told me to sit down in a specific place on the couch, on this one couch. She didn't want me to sit. At one point I was sitting in a chair talking to her. But then later she was telling me, sit down on this couch, this one couch, too. And both times, the entire time that I sat in front of her, my lower back was in so much excruciating pain. It was like an ultrasound kind of a pain. I was in so much pain suddenly with my lower back, in the same way that had been done to me, that put me into preterm labor with my son. And in the same way that happened to me when I said I told Alvaro I wasn't going to sleep in his bed and I was going to sleep on the sleep sofa for the night. The exact same form of technology was that then put me into the ER when I slept on his couch instead of his bed, and which sent me to the emergency room. I walked into her offices with no pain at all. There was nothing going on. And when I was in her offices, sitting in front of her, and specifically sitting on her couch, all of a sudden I had something done to my lower back. That was the exact same thing as put me in preterm labor and was punishment for my not sleeping in Alvaro Pardo's bed. Both times sending me to the ER. And that form of technology was also used on me and my son the entire time that we were in East Wenatchee. So it wasn't just benign fasciculations for some kind of MRI technology that was cooking us alive, basically. But there was some kind of an ultrasound thing going on the entire time that was extremely debilitating and caused an extreme amount of pain. And they did that to me in her office, Lucretia Krebs' office. Not in the waiting room, not in the hall, not outside of the facility. It was done in her office. And she specifically told me she wanted me to sit on the couch. I didn't even want to sit on the couch. You know, maybe that was part of an idea of like, remember how this happened to you when you tried to sleep on the sleep sofa? And then I was told to, after that was over, I stood up and I went to the bathroom, and I noticed, because I suddenly was removed from having my lower back heated up and going into a really aching pain. When I left her offices, I realized, oh my gosh, because at first I hadn't known exactly what they were doing. Basically, you know, I had talked one time about how the United States was wake up people because you're like a frog cooking in a pot. That's kind of what basically the United States did to me. They made fun of every single thing that I wrote about, and they decided to torture me and make a little inside joke about the way that they were going to torture me. They basically would start using a form of technology against me that started out that you couldn't notice, that you didn't notice at first that you were being tortured, and then after a while you realized that your body was being cooked in a certain area and that you were being tortured, and when you removed yourself then you realized how bad it had been. I mean, so like the frog cooking in the pot, that's exactly what they did to me, and it was hate. All of this has been hate crime. This is not, nobody's getting these ideas because they're coming up with scientific research ideas. They're coming up with ideas because they hate me and because they hate what I've written on my blog. And then to punish me, they come up with ways that they can satisfy those who hate me the most and laugh at me and make fun of me. It has nothing to do, there is not going to be there is not going to be future classification of what has been done to me and my son. And in fact, that any classified material that's been classified is going to be declassified, because I'm going to prove that what has been done is hate crime. I haven't even talked enough about how a lot of this hate crime that happened with telecommunications was always with individuals bringing up the name Mary either. I mean, I talked about how Melina, their employees kept answering the phone with Mary or Maria, but that was happening in Oregon too. I would call the Oregon courthouse when I was trying to report the FBI employees, and Sergeant Austria was in charge of that complaint that I had made. I'd call the Victims Association people, I'd call various courthouses, and people were making fun of me and saying that their name was Mary every time I picked up the phone to call anybody over there in Portland, Oregon as well. I mean, I wasn't calling people and talking about religion. People were throwing it back in my face to punish me. So while I was in Lucretia Krebs' offices, I was tortured. When I went back to her offices, there was one test, or a couple of tests that I had to take on my own, and she wanted to leave the door open while I was taking these tests, and I was basically facing this wall, and it was this huge room. And I was told to sit right there at this one table and take this test, and then they left the door cracked open. And I would have to think again. As to whether she closed the door and I said I wanted it open and I left it open a little bit, or if she left it open and I wanted it closed. It may have been that, I don't remember. I'll have to think about it, but she did one thing and I wanted it the other way, and there was no reason not to. So I changed it. But, and it wasn't there was no reason why I couldn't have. I think it was possibly that it was a reason for it. It was either that she left it open and I closed it because people kept walking by and looking in at me while I was trying to take my test. I think that's what it was. And it was distracting. But what was more distracting is that I was tortured while I was taking the MMPI. And I was tortured at very high levels again while taking the test. And it was torture that interfered with my ability to do things quickly. Because it was so painful, it was distracting. Typically I could get an MMPI done, in record time. And because they were torturing me the entire time that I was taking that test, it slowed down the entire process, and I wasn't able to think as clearly or read what I was writing. I would sometimes have to read the same sentence more than once because of the level of torture that they were using, and I looked around. I would turn around and look around and look at the room and think, who's doing this? And did they set something up in this room that's being directed at me? And I felt that I was being watched on video, that they had a running video camera at the same time in that room while I took the test. And I didn't know, I really wasn't sure what was going on. But then when I left, that happened, and it wasn't my imagination, I wasn't paranoid. They tortured me while I was taking the MMPI, and I still went through it as quickly as I could, and it didn't take that long, but I was stalled because of the amount of torture that they were using against me. And when I left their offices, there was this man driving by who looked like a gangster, and he was just laughing at me in a huge kind of utility truck. It wasn't like a full-size semi, but some sort of a large truck of some kind. And I realized there are people who have been waiting, who are out waiting for me to leave, who are outside of this facility that know that I was just tortured inside there, and now they're making fun of me. They're laughing because they know that I was tortured while I was in there. And this is a place that I went to. When I went there, I sat in the lobby and they were playing Christian music. It was this, you know, low key, they had everything on the Christian station with Christian music playing. And then I went into those offices and I was tortured. And you have to believe me, because when I say that I was at different times, you know, I've been trying to call different businesses, and the businesses were, I was getting a message that said business was closed when it wasn't closed. That sounds crazy. Or like I must have just not known that it was the right time or the wrong time. But I uploaded some information, some evidence of an example of that on my YouTube cache, I guess. And I proved that that did happen. That happened on that one instance, and it has happened many, many times. And there are much, much worse things that have happened. Much worse. And you have to believe me.